The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine grounds of Windsor Castle, as 10-year-old Prince George walked alongside his personal protection officer, Detective Inspector James Morrison. The young prince moved with the careful grace that had been instilled in him since birth, his small frame carrying the invisible weight of future kingship. James had been assigned to protect the third in line to the throne for nearly 2 years, and in that time, he had watched the boy navigate the complex world of royal protocol with remarkable maturity. On this particular Tuesday in September, the castle buzzed with quiet activity as preparations were underway for a state visit from the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Staff members hurried through corridors carrying fresh linens, polished silver, and carefully arranged flower displays. The atmosphere was one of controlled efficiency, each person knowing their role in maintaining the seamless operation of royal life. Prince George paused near the East Terrace, where several maintenance workers were tending to the famous rose garden. His tutor had dismissed him early from his morning French lesson, giving him a rare 30 minutes of free time before his next scheduled activity. James stood a respectful distance away, his trained eyes scanning the surroundings while remaining alert to any potential threats. The young prince's attention was drawn to an elderly groundskeeper who was struggling with a heavy wheelbarrow filled with pruned branches and fallen leaves. The man, who appeared to be in his 70s, was breathing heavily as he attempted to maneuver the unwieldy load across the uneven gravel path. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool autumn air, and his weathered hands shook slightly as he gripped the handles. Without hesitation, Prince George approached the groundskeeper. James instinctively moved closer, his protective instincts heightened by any deviation from the prince's expected routine. The detective had been trained to anticipate and prevent any situation that might compromise the young royal's safety or dignity. But something in the prince's determined expression made him pause. "Excuse me, sir," Prince George said politely to the groundskeeper, his voice carrying the clear articulation that had been carefully cultivated through years of elocution lessons. "That looks quite heavy. Would you like some help?" The elderly man straightened up, his tired eyes widening in recognition of the young prince. For a moment, he seemed uncertain how to respond, glancing nervously between the boy and the imposing figure of Detective Inspector Morrison. The groundskeeper, whose name was Harold Whitman, had worked on the castle grounds for over 40 years. He had seen 3 generations of the royal family grow up within these walls, but never had one of them directly offered to assist him with his work. "Your Royal Highness," Harold stammered, automatically removing his worn cloth cap and clutching it to his chest. I couldn't possibly ask you to help with such work. It wouldn't be proper." Prince George tilted his head slightly, a gesture that reminded James of the boy's father when he was deep in thought. "But you didn't ask me," the prince replied with simple logic. "I offered. There's a difference, isn't there?" James watched the interaction with growing admiration for his young charge. In his 25 years of service with Scotland Yard, he had protected politicians, diplomats, and members of various royal families around the world. He had seen how power and privilege could isolate individuals from the basic human experiences that connected people to one another. Yet here was this 10-year-old boy, third in line to the throne of the United Kingdom and 15 Commonwealth realms, offering to help an elderly worker with genuine concern and respect. Harold looked around nervously, noting the presence of other staff members who had stopped their work to observe the unusual scene. The castle's head groundskeeper, a stern man named Robert Fellows, was approaching from across the garden with a disapproving expression. Protocol dictated that interactions between the royal family and staff members should be minimal and formal, conducted only when absolutely necessary, and always through proper channels. "Your Highness," Harold said quietly, his voice trembling slightly. "Mr. Fellows wouldn't approve. There are rules about these things, proper procedures." Prince George followed Harold's gaze to the approaching head groundskeeper, then looked back at the elderly man with determination in his young eyes. "Sometimes," he said, reaching for one handle of the wheelbarrow, "doing the right thing is more important than following every rule." James felt his heart skip a beat as the young prince grasped the wheelbarrow handle. His training screamed at him to intervene, to maintain the protective barrier that protocol demanded between the prince and any potential risk. Yet something deeper, something that spoke to his own sense of humanity, held him back. He had spent countless hours observing Prince George during formal functions, watching as the boy navigated receiving lines and ceremonial duties with practiced politeness. This was the first time he had seen the prince act entirely from his own moral compass, without the guidance of tutors or the expectations of royal handlers. The detective made a split-second decision that would later be debated in security briefings and royal household meetings. Instead of stepping forward to discourage the prince's actions, he moved to position himself strategically, ensuring that he could still fulfill his protective duties while allowing the interaction to continue. His hand remained near his radio, ready to call for backup if needed. But his instincts told him that the only danger present was to rigid protocol rather than to the prince's physical safety. Harold's weathered face showed a mixture of gratitude and anxiety as Prince George helped lift the wheelbarrow. Together, they began to move the heavy load across the gravel path toward the compost area near the castle's kitchen garden. The young prince's face reddened with effort, but he maintained his grip on the handle, matching Harold's slower pace with patient consideration. Other staff members had gathered at a respectful distance, watching the unprecedented scene unfold. Kitchen staff peered from windows, gardeners paused in their pruning, and even some of the castle's administrative personnel had found reasons to step outside. Word spread quickly through the servants' quarters that Prince George was helping old Harold with his wheelbarrow, and the reaction was one of amazement rather than scandal. As they reached the compost area, Prince George helped Harold tip the wheelbarrow to empty its contents. Leaves and branches tumbled out in a shower of autumn colors, creating a satisfying pile that would eventually nourish next year's gardens. The prince dusted off his hands on his perfectly pressed trousers, leaving small smudges that would later cause his valet considerable distress. "Thank you, Your Highness," Harold said, his voice thick with emotion. "In all my years here, no one from the family has ever. I mean to say, you didn't need to. Everyone needs help sometimes," Prince George replied simply. "My great-grandmother always told me that true nobility comes from how we treat others, especially when no one is watching." He paused, looking around at the gathered staff members. "Though it seems quite a few people are watching today." The reference to Queen Elizabeth II, who had passed away 2 years earlier, sent a ripple of emotion through the assembled crowd. The beloved monarch had been known for her own quiet acts of kindness toward staff, though always within the bounds of established protocol. To hear her great-grandson echo her values in such a direct and personal way touched hearts that had served the royal family with devotion for decades. Head groundskeeper Robert Fellows finally reached the group, his stern expression softening as he took in the scene. He had been prepared to deliver a sharp reminder about proper procedures, but the sight of the young prince's genuine smile and Harold's grateful tears gave him pause. In his 15 years of managing the castle's extensive grounds, he had never witnessed such a spontaneous act of kindness from any member of the royal family. "Your Royal Highness," Fellows said carefully, offering a respectful bow. "Perhaps we should inform your equerry of your location. There might be concerns about your schedule." Prince George nodded politely but showed no signs of hurry. "Of course, Mr. Fellows. But first, I'd like to know more about Mr. Whitman's work here. He's been taking care of these gardens for 40 years. That's longer than my father has been alive." James observed the interaction with growing respect for his young charge. The prince was demonstrating an intuitive understanding of leadership that went far beyond his formal education. By showing genuine interest in Harold's work and acknowledging his long service, Prince George was displaying the kind of personal touch that had made his great-grandmother so beloved by the British people. Harold's face lit up as he began to describe his decades of service to the royal household. He spoke of planting trees that had grown to provide shade for royal grandchildren, of maintaining flower beds that had served as backdrops for countless official photographs, and of the pride he took in ensuring that the castle grounds remained worthy of their historic significance. As Harold talked, other groundskeepers gradually joined the conversation, drawn by the prince's evident interest in their work. They explained the seasonal cycles of garden maintenance, the challenges of preserving historic landscaping while adapting to modern environmental concerns, and the careful planning required to ensure that the grounds remained beautiful year-round for both private family use and public events. Prince George listened with the focused attention that his tutors had worked so hard to develop, asking thoughtful questions and making connections between what he was learning and other aspects of royal life that he had observed. His genuine curiosity and respect for the workers' expertise created an atmosphere of mutual appreciation that transcended the usual barriers of protocol and social hierarchy. Detective Inspector Morrison found himself deeply moved by what he was witnessing. In his years of protecting high-profile individuals, he had seen how easy it was for people in positions of power to become isolated from the everyday experiences of ordinary citizens. The prince's willingness to engage with the castle staff on such a personal level suggested that his character was being shaped by values that would serve him well in his future role as king. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Prince George's equerry, an efficient young woman named Sarah Mitchell, who had been searching for the prince when he failed to appear for his scheduled appointment with his music tutor. Her expression showed mild alarm as she took in the scene of the young royal, surrounded by groundskeepers, his clothes slightly disheveled from his assistance with the wheelbarrow. "Your Royal Highness," Sarah said with practiced diplomacy, "your piano instructor is waiting in the music room." "Perhaps we should." Prince George turned to her with a smile that showed no awareness of any impropriety in his actions. "Of course, Miss Mitchell. I was just learning about the important work that Mr. Flace, Whitman and his colleagues do to maintain our beautiful gardens." He turned back to Harold and offered a small bow of his own. "Thank you for teaching me so much, Mr. Whitman. I hope we can speak again soon." The elderly groundskeeper's eyes filled with tears as he watched the young prince walk away, flanked by his protection officer and equerry. In 40 years of service to the royal household, he had received numerous commendations, and had even been personally thanked by Queen Elizabeth II on his retirement day, which was still several months away. But nothing in his long career had meant as much to him as those few minutes of genuine human connection with the future king. As Prince George disappeared into the castle, the gathered staff members remained in the garden, discussing what they had witnessed with quiet amazement. The story would spread throughout the royal household within hours, reaching from the lowest kitchen assistant to the highest members of the prince's personal staff. Some would express concern about the breach of protocol, while others would see it as a promising sign of the prince's developing character. James Morrison walked slightly behind Prince George as they made their way to the music room, his mind processing the implications of what had just occurred. His job was to protect the prince from physical harm, but he was beginning to understand that there were other kinds of protection that the young royal might need. The boy's natural instincts toward kindness and service could be seen as either a strength to be encouraged or a vulnerability to be managed, depending on one's perspective. The detective had observed enough royal functions to know that every public action by a member of the royal family was scrutinized, analyzed, and interpreted through multiple lenses. What seemed like a simple act of kindness in a castle garden could become the subject of newspaper editorials, political commentary, and public debate. Yet as he watched Prince George's confident stride toward his piano lesson, James felt certain that the boy had acted from genuine moral conviction rather than any calculated attempt to create a public impression. 3 hours later, news of Prince George's interaction with Harold Whitman had reached the highest levels of the royal household. Private Secretary to the Prince of Wales, Sir Anthony Pemberton, sat in his oak-paneled office reviewing the day's schedule when he received an urgent call from the castle's deputy master of the household. The conversation was brief but concerning enough to warrant immediate attention. Detective Inspector James Morrison had been summoned to Sir Anthony's office to provide a detailed account of the morning's events. As one of the most senior administrators in the royal household, Sir Anthony was responsible for ensuring that all activities involving the younger royals were conducted in accordance with established protocols, while also protecting their personal development and public image. "Detective Inspector Morrison," Sir Anthony began, his tone measured but serious. "I understand there was an incident this morning involving Prince George and some of the groundskeeping staff. I'd like to hear your account of what transpired." James straightened in his chair, his years of police training helping him to present his report clearly and objectively. "Sir Anthony, at approximately 10:15 this morning, Prince George encountered an elderly groundskeeper who was struggling with a heavy wheelbarrow. The prince offered assistance and helped the man transport garden debris to the compost area. The interaction lasted approximately 12 minutes and was observed by several castle staff members." Sir Anthony leaned back in his leather chair, his fingers steepled as he considered the implications. And your assessment of any security risks presented by this interaction? In my professional opinion, sir, there were no security threats present. The groundskeeper, Harold Whitman, has been employed by the royal household for 40 years and has undergone extensive background checks. His colleagues who gathered to observe were all verified staff members. I maintained visual contact with Prince George throughout the incident and was positioned to intervene if necessary. The private secretary nodded slowly. What about protocol concerns? Was Prince George acting under any guidance from his tutors or equerry? James hesitated for a moment before responding honestly. No, sir. The prince acted entirely on his own initiative. Miss Mitchell arrived toward the end of the interaction and appeared surprised by what she found. Prince George's actions seemed to stem from his own moral judgment rather than any formal instruction. Sir Anthony stood and walked to the tall windows that overlooked the castle's main courtyard, where tourists were gathering for the changing of the guard ceremony. The weight of his responsibility was evident in his careful consideration of every word. As private secretary, he served as the primary liaison between the royal family and the government, the media, and the public. Every decision he made could have far-reaching consequences for the monarchy's reputation and effectiveness. Detective Inspector, Sir Anthony said without turning around, in your time protecting Prince George, have you observed other instances of similar independent action on his part? James thought carefully before responding. Prince George has always shown consideration for others, sir. He's polite to staff members, remembers personal details about people he's met before, and shows genuine interest when adults explain their work to him. However, this morning was the first time I've seen him take such direct physical action to help someone, particularly in a way that could be seen as stepping outside his expected role. The private secretary returned to his desk and opened a thick file containing reports from Prince George's various tutors, security personnel, and household staff. The boy's academic progress was excellent. His behavior was consistently exemplary, and his preparation for his future royal duties was proceeding ahead of schedule. Yet this morning's incident represented something new in his development, something that couldn't be easily categorized or controlled. Has there been any reaction from the staff who witnessed the incident? Sir Anthony asked. The response has been overwhelmingly positive, sir. The kitchen staff were discussing it with obvious approval, and several groundskeepers approached me afterward to express their admiration for Prince George's character. Harold Whitman himself was deeply moved by the prince's gesture. I've heard no criticism from any quarter. Sir Anthony made several notes in the file before looking up at James with a slight smile. And your personal opinion, Detective Inspector? How do you assess what happened this morning? James had been hoping to avoid this question, knowing that his role was to provide security rather than commentary on royal behavior. However, Sir Anthony's direct inquiry required an honest response. Sir, I believe Prince George acted from genuine compassion and moral conviction. His behavior demonstrated leadership qualities that speak well for his future role. While it may have been unconventional, it was also deeply human. The private secretary closed the file and stood again. Thank you for your candid assessment, Detective Inspector. Your discretion in handling the situation this morning was exemplary. I trust that your report of these events will remain confidential unless specifically requested by senior members of the royal household. As James left the office, he felt a mixture of relief and concern. He had been honest in his assessment while protecting Prince George's reputation, but he wondered what decisions would be made about the prince's future interactions with castle staff. The delicate balance between developing the boy's character and maintaining royal protocol was becoming increasingly complex as he matured and formed his own judgments about appropriate behavior. Meanwhile, in the servants' quarters beneath the main castle, Harold Whitman was finishing his afternoon shift with a lightness in his step that his colleagues hadn't seen in months. The elderly groundskeeper had been struggling with the physical demands of his job for some time, though his pride had prevented him from asking for assistance or acknowledging his growing limitations. The prince's unexpected help had provided more than just physical relief. It had restored his sense of dignity and worth. Harold, called out Margaret Davies, the head of housekeeping, as she encountered him near the staff entrance. I heard about what happened this morning with Prince George. How wonderful that must have been for you. Harold paused in hanging up his work coat, his weathered face lighting up with a smile. Mrs. Davies, in all my years here, I've never experienced anything quite like it. The young prince saw that I was struggling and simply stepped in to help, as natural as you please. No ceremony, no fuss. Just one person helping another. Margaret had worked at the castle for nearly 30 years herself, having started as a junior housemaid and worked her way up to her current position. She had observed the royal family through both formal occasions and private moments, developing a deep appreciation for their dedication to duty while maintaining her own strong opinions about proper behavior and protocol. That speaks very well of his character, Margaret said thoughtfully, though I imagine there are some in the household who might have concerns about protocol. Harold nodded, his expression becoming more serious. Mr. Fellows wasn't entirely pleased when he arrived. Not that he said anything directly, mind you, but I could see the worry in his eyes. There are rules about these things, proper channels and all that. The two long-serving staff members walked together toward the main corridor, their conversation reflecting the complex dynamics that governed life within the royal household. Both had dedicated their careers to serving the monarchy, and both understood the importance of maintaining the dignity and traditions that supported the institution's role in British society. Yet both had also been moved by Prince George's spontaneous act of kindness. In the castle's education wing, Prince George was struggling to concentrate on his piano lesson. His instructor, Miss Elena Kozlov, was an accomplished musician who had been hired to develop the prince's musical abilities as part of his broader cultural education. She had noticed his distraction from the moment he entered the music room, but had attributed it to the beautiful autumn weather visible through the tall windows. "Your Highness," Miss Kozlov said gently, pausing their work on a Bach invention. "Your technique is excellent as always, but your mind seems to be elsewhere today. Is there something you'd like to discuss?" Prince George lifted his hands from the piano keys and looked at his instructor with unusual directness. "Miss Kozlov, do you think it's always right to follow rules, even when following them might prevent you from helping someone who needs help?" The Russian-born pianist had been teaching members of various royal families for over 20 years, but she had never been asked such a profound moral question by any of her young students. Her classical training had emphasized discipline, precision, and adherence to established forms, yet her life experience had taught her that the most meaningful music often came from moments of spontaneous expression and emotional authenticity. "That's a very thoughtful question, Your Highness," she said, sitting down on the piano bench beside him. "In music, we learn scales and techniques and formal structures because they give us the tools to express ourselves clearly and beautifully. But the greatest musicians are those who know when to follow the rules precisely and when to bend them in service of something more important." Prince George considered her words carefully. "So sometimes breaking a rule can be the right thing to do?" Miss Kozlov smiled, recognizing the intelligence and moral seriousness of her young student. "Sometimes, Your Highness, the highest form of respect for rules is knowing when they should yield to higher principles like compassion and service to others. But that requires great wisdom and careful judgment." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Prince George's academic tutor, Dr. Patricia Hawthorne, who was scheduled to conduct his afternoon history lesson. Dr. Hawthorne had been privately briefed about the morning's incident and was prepared to address any questions or concerns the prince might have about appropriate royal behavior. "Good afternoon, Your Highness, Doctor," Hawthorne said with her usual scholarly precision. "I thought we might spend today's lesson discussing the concept of noblesse oblige and its application throughout British royal history." Prince George looked up with immediate interest. "Noblesse oblige? What does that mean exactly?" Dr. Hawthorne settled into her preferred chair near the window and opened her leather portfolio. "It's a French phrase that means nobility obligates. The concept holds that those who are privileged by birth, wealth, or position have a moral responsibility to act generously and responsibly toward those who are less fortunate." The prince's eyes brightened as he recognized the connection to his morning's actions. "So it means that being royal comes with duties, not just privileges?" "Precisely, Your Highness. Throughout British history, the most admired members of the royal family have been those who understood that their position was meant to serve the greater good rather than simply their own comfort or convenience. Dr. Hawthorne proceeded to share examples from royal history, describing how various kings and queens had balanced formal protocol with personal acts of service and compassion. She spoke of King George VI's visits to bombed neighborhoods during World War II, of Queen Elizabeth II's countless interactions with ordinary citizens during her 7-decade reign, and of Prince Philip's pioneering work with youth development programs. As the lesson progressed, Prince George began to understand that his morning's actions were part of a long tradition of royal service, even if they had departed from established protocol. The concept of noblesse oblige provided a framework for understanding that his position came with both privileges and responsibilities, and that sometimes fulfilling those responsibilities might require making difficult choices about when to follow rules and when to follow conscience. Dr. Hawthorne, Prince George said as their lesson concluded, "If someone in my position helps a person who needs help, even if it's not part of an official engagement or ceremony, is that still considered royal duty?" The tutor smiled, recognizing the mature thoughtfulness of the question. "Your Highness, I believe that authentic royal duty often happens in the quiet moments when no one is watching and no cameras are recording. The character we show in those private moments may be the truest measure of our fitness for public responsibility." As evening approached, the story of Prince George's morning gesture continued to spread through the royal household. Kitchen staff shared it with their families in nearby villages. Gardeners discussed it during their tea break, and administrative personnel mentioned it in their reports to superiors. Each telling of the story was colored by the teller's own perspective and experience, but all emphasized the prince's kindness and genuine concern for Harold Whitman's welfare. In the security office, Detective Inspector Morrison was completing his daily report when he received an unexpected visitor. Harold Whitman stood in the doorway, his work clothes replaced by his best suit, his usually confident demeanor replaced by obvious nervousness. "Inspector Morrison," Harold said quietly, "I hope you don't mind the intrusion. I wanted to speak with you about this morning." James gestured for Harold to sit down, noting the worry lines that creased the elderly man's face. "Of course, Mr. Whitman. How can I help you?" Harold twisted his cap in his hands, struggling to find the right words. "I've been thinking all day about what happened, about Prince George helping me with that wheelbarrow. It was the kindest thing anyone has done for me in years, but I'm worried that I might have caused problems for him. I know there are rules about these things, proper procedures." The detective leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. "Mr. Whitman, you did nothing wrong. Prince George chose to help you because he saw that you needed assistance, and because it was the right thing to do. That choice reflects his character, not any failing on your part." Harold's eyes filled with tears of gratitude and relief. "In 40 years of working here, I've never felt so valued, so seen as a person rather than just part of the machinery. That young man has a heart of gold, Inspector Morrison. The country will be blessed to have him as king someday." As Harold left the security office, James reflected on the profound impact that Prince George's simple gesture had created throughout the royal household. A single act of kindness, lasting barely 12 minutes, had touched the lives of dozens of people and had sparked conversations about duty, protocol, and authentic leadership at every level of the organization. The detective understood that his role in protecting Prince George extended beyond physical security to include safeguarding the boy's moral development and supporting his growth into the kind of leader the country would need in the decades to come. The morning's events had shown him that the greatest threat to the prince's future effectiveness might not come from external dangers, but from well-meaning attempts to shield him from the very human connections that would make him a truly great king. 2 weeks after the wheelbarrow incident, Detective Inspector James Morrison received an invitation that would change the trajectory of his career and his understanding of royal service. The invitation, delivered on the distinctive cream-colored stationery of the royal household, requested his presence at a private meeting with the Prince of Wales to discuss matters concerning the security and development of Prince George. James had never met Prince William personally, though he had observed him from a distance during various family gatherings and official functions. The prospect of a direct conversation with the future king about his son's protection filled the detective with both anticipation and anxiety. He understood that his handling of the wheelbarrow incident would likely be a central topic of discussion. The meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock on a crisp October morning in Prince William's private study at Kensington Palace. James arrived precisely on time, having spent considerable effort ensuring that his uniform was immaculate, and his report on Prince George's activities was comprehensive and accurate. He was escorted through elegant corridors lined with portraits of previous generations of royals to a comfortable room overlooking the palace gardens. Prince William rose from behind an antique desk as James entered, his welcoming smile immediately putting the detective at ease. The Prince of Wales was dressed casually in a navy pullover and khaki trousers, his informal attire suggesting that this would be a personal conversation rather than an official briefing. "Detective Inspector Morrison," Prince William said, extending his hand for a firm handshake. "Thank you for coming. Please, have a seat. I've been looking forward to this conversation." James settled into a comfortable armchair across from the desk, his posture respectful but relaxed. The room's atmosphere was scholarly rather than ceremonial, with books lining the walls and family photographs scattered across side tables. A particularly touching image of Prince George and his siblings playing in these same gardens caught the detective's attention. "I understand you've been protecting George for nearly 2 years now," Prince William began, settling back into his own chair. "I've received excellent reports about your professionalism and dedication. More importantly, George speaks of you with genuine respect and affection." The prince's words were unexpected and deeply meaningful to James, who had worked hard to maintain the proper balance between protection and mentorship in his relationship with the young royal. "Thank you, sir. Prince George is an exceptional young man. It's been an honor to serve in his protection detail." Prince William's expression grew more serious as he leaned forward slightly. "I wanted to speak with you about the incident 2 weeks ago involving George and Harold Whitman, the groundskeeper. I've read Sir Anthony's report and spoken with several staff members who witnessed what happened. I'd like to hear your perspective on George's actions and your decision to allow the interaction to continue." James had prepared extensively for this question, knowing that his response could determine both his future with the Royal Protection Unit and Prince George's continued development. "Sir." Prince George saw an elderly man struggling with a heavy load and offered assistance without any prompting or consideration for protocol. His motivation was purely compassionate. "I assessed the situation and determined that there were no security risks present, so I allowed the interaction to proceed while maintaining protective oversight." The Prince of Wales nodded thoughtfully. "And your opinion of George's judgment in that moment?" "In my professional assessment, sir, Prince George demonstrated exactly the kind of moral leadership that will serve him well as future king. His actions were spontaneous but not impulsive, helpful but not patronizing, and genuine in their motivation. He treated Harold Whitman with dignity and respect while providing practical assistance." Prince William stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the gardens where his children played regularly. "Detective Inspector, I want to share something with you that I've never discussed publicly. When I was George's age, I sometimes felt trapped by protocol, unable to connect with people in meaningful ways because of concerns about propriety and security. I don't want that for my son." The prince's honesty was startling, and James recognized the trust being placed in him by this admission. "Sir? Sir? The monarchy's greatest strength has always been its connection to the people it serves," Prince William continued, still looking out the window. "My grandmother understood this instinctively. She could follow protocol perfectly when required, but she also knew when to set it aside in favor of human connection. I want George to develop that same instinct." Prince William returned to his desk and pulled out a folder containing what appeared to be letters and reports. "Since the incident with Harold Whitman, I've received dozens of messages from castle staff, expressing their admiration for George's character. More importantly, I've noticed a change in how the staff interact with him. They see him as a real person now, not just a future king, and that's incredibly valuable." James listened intently as the Prince of Wales described his vision for his son's development. Rather than being sheltered from human interaction, Prince George needed carefully managed opportunities to engage with people from all walks of life. The challenge was creating these opportunities while maintaining appropriate security and avoiding the artificial staged encounters that could undermine their authenticity. "Detective Inspector," Prince William said, his tone becoming more formal. I have a proposition for you. I'd like to modify your role with George's protection detail. In addition to your security responsibilities, I want you to serve as a mentor and guide, helping him navigate situations where his natural compassion might conflict with established protocol. The offer was unexpected and represented a significant expansion of James's responsibilities. Sir, I'm honored by your confidence, but I should point out that my training is in security and law enforcement, not in royal protocol or child development. Prince William smiled. That's exactly why you're perfect for this role. You understand real-world situations and genuine human needs. You can help George learn to balance his royal duties with his human instincts. Sir Anthony and the other household officials will handle protocol training. You'll help him understand when protocol serves its purpose and when compassion should take precedence. Over the next hour, Prince William outlined his vision for his son's expanded interaction with the wider world. Rather than restricting Prince George's contact with castle staff, they would create structured opportunities for him to learn about different aspects of the royal household's operation. He would spend time with gardeners, kitchen staff, security personnel, and administrative workers, learning about their responsibilities while developing his understanding of the institution he would someday lead. There's one more thing, Prince William said as their meeting neared its conclusion. Harold Whitman is retiring next month, after 40 years of service. I'd like George to present him with his service medal at a small ceremony. It would be George's first official presentation duty, and I think it's fitting that it should honor the man whose need for help revealed so much about my son's character. James felt a surge of emotion at the appropriateness of this gesture. Sir, I think Harold would be deeply honored, and it would be meaningful for Prince George as well. 3 weeks later, a small gathering assembled in the same garden where Prince George had first encountered Harold Whitman struggling with his wheelbarrow. The ceremony was intimate, attended only by senior groundskeeping staff, key household officials, and Harold's immediate family. Prince George, dressed in a formal suit but looking surprisingly relaxed, stood beside a small podium that had been set up near the rose garden. Detective Inspector Morrison watched from his usual protective position as Prince George prepared to make his first official presentation. The boy had spent considerable time preparing his remarks, working with his tutors to craft words that would honor Harold's service while expressing his personal gratitude for what he had learned from their encounter. Ladies and gentlemen, Prince George began, his voice clear and confident. We gather today to honor Mr. Harold Whitman, who has devoted 40 years of his life to maintaining the beauty and dignity of these historic grounds. During his service, he has tended gardens that have witnessed centuries of royal history, and he has done so with dedication, skill, and pride. Harold stood at attention, his best suit pressed to perfection, his face glowing with pride as his family watched from nearby chairs. The elderly groundskeeper had been overwhelmed when informed about the ceremony, unable to believe that his years of quiet service would be recognized in such a personal way by the future king. A few weeks ago, Prince George continued, I had the privilege of working alongside Mr. Whitman for a few minutes, helping him with a task that was part of his daily service to our family and our home. In those moments, I learned something important about both service and leadership. I learned that true nobility comes not from our position or our titles, but from our willingness to help others and to recognize the dignity and value of every person's contribution. The prince paused, looking directly at Harold with genuine warmth. Mr. Whitman, your 40 years of service have made our home more beautiful, but more than that, your example has helped shape my understanding of what it means to serve with integrity and humility. On behalf of my family and the royal household, I thank you for your dedication, and I present you with this medal in recognition of your faithful service. As Prince George stepped forward to place the medal around Harold's neck, the elderly groundskeeper's eyes filled with tears. The ceremony was being photographed for the royal household's records, but the moment felt intimate and personal rather than formal and staged. Thank you, Your Royal Highness, Harold said, his voice trembling with emotion. Working here has been the honor of my lifetime, and knowing that I've played a small part in preparing these gardens for your future reign gives my service deeper meaning than I ever imagined. The brief ceremony concluded with a reception in the castle's staff dining room, where Harold was surrounded by colleagues eager to congratulate him on his recognition. Prince George moved through the gathering with natural ease, speaking with gardeners about their work, asking thoughtful questions about seasonal planning, and showing genuine interest in the challenges and satisfactions of maintaining such extensive grounds. Detective Inspector Morrison observed these interactions with growing confidence that Prince William's vision for his son's development was proving successful. Rather than creating artificial encounters, the prince was learning to engage authentically with people whose lives intersected with his own. These relationships, built on mutual respect and genuine interest, would serve as a foundation for the kind of leadership the country would need in the coming decades. As the reception wound down, Harold approached Detective Inspector Morrison with a small wrapped package. "Inspector," he said quietly, "I wanted to give you this as a token of my gratitude. Without your wisdom in allowing that first encounter to unfold naturally, none of this would have been possible." James unwrapped the package to find a small framed photograph of the castle gardens taken from Harold's favorite vantage point near the compost area where Prince George had helped him that autumn morning. The image captured the timeless beauty of the grounds, while serving as a reminder of a moment when protocol had yielded to compassion with profound results. 6 months after Harold Whitman's retirement ceremony, Detective Inspector Morrison received official notification of his promotion to Chief Protection Officer for Prince George, a role that formally recognized his expanded responsibilities as both guardian and mentor. The position came with increased authority to make decisions about the prince's security, while also giving him input into the young royal's educational and social development. Prince George, now 11 years old, had continued to develop the balance between formal royal duties and authentic human connection that his father had hoped to instill. His interactions with castle staff had become a model for how future royals might engage with the people they serve, maintaining dignity and respect while breaking down artificial barriers that could prevent meaningful relationships. The wheelbarrow incident, as it came to be known within royal household circles, had become a touchstone for discussions about modernizing royal protocol without abandoning its essential purposes. Rather than restricting Prince George's spontaneous acts of kindness, the household had learned to create frameworks that supported such interactions while maintaining appropriate security and dignity. Harold Whitman, enjoying his retirement in a cottage on the castle grounds, had become an unofficial advisor on matters relating to staff, morale, and long-term service recognition. His story was quietly shared with new employees as an example of how individual dedication could be noticed and valued at the highest levels of the royal household. Most significantly, Prince George had internalized the lesson that true leadership often required the courage to act on moral conviction, even when such action might challenge established expectations. His understanding of noblesse oblige had evolved from an abstract concept learned in history lessons to a lived principle that guided his daily interactions with everyone he encountered. Detective Inspector Morrison, reflecting on his expanded role, understood that he was witnessing the formation of a future king whose reign would be characterized by the same combination of dignity and accessibility that had made Queen Elizabeth II so beloved. The quiet action in a castle garden had revealed character traits that would eventually shape the monarchy's relationship with the British people for generations to come. The story of Prince George's simple gesture of helping an elderly groundskeeper had rippled through the royal household and beyond, touching lives in ways that no formal ceremony or official engagement could have achieved. It had demonstrated that the most powerful acts of leadership often happen in the smallest moments, when no cameras are present and no speeches are required. But when one person simply chooses to help another in need, as Prince George continued his education and preparation for his future role, the lessons learned in those few minutes beside Harold Whitman's wheelbarrow remained central to his developing understanding of what it truly meant to be royal. The incident had shown that the highest form of noble behavior was not the perfect execution of protocol, but the willingness to set protocol aside when human compassion demanded action. In the years that followed, the prince would face many more complex decisions about when to follow established rules and when to follow his conscience. But the foundation laid in that autumn garden, supported by a detective who chose wisdom over rigid adherence to procedure, would guide him toward becoming the kind of leader who could honor tradition while remaining genuinely connected to the people he was destined to serve.